phones or turn them to silent. It's my privilege to welcome Wurundjeri man Daniel Ross to deliver the welcome to country to our council this evening. I invite Daniel Ross to address the council. And I'd just like to ask Council if we could turn on the live stream for the meeting.
Hello all, my name's Daniel Ross and I'm a proud Wurundjeri man, and I'm humbled to be here with you all tonight, and I want to acknowledge the councillors and I want to acknowledge those that are watching online and those in the gallery. Bunjil is our creator, the wedge-tailed eagle. Bunjil created everything we see, from the stars in the sky to the roots of the trees in the ground. Those roots of the trees intertwine through one another, sharing resource, just as we share knowledge from old to young. Bunjil taught us how to listen and how to care, but it's 2025. What does that mean? And you'll notice the wattle starting to bloom come October. You'll see the cherry Bellairs growing on the Maribyrnong, the most northern boundary of the LGA. That's a sign that we pause and we check on our old people. So remember that. 236 years ago, life as we knew it would change. The Maribyrnong, one of the oldest waterways in the continent, the Birrarung, the Yarra River, runs through country like the blood in our veins, providing life and resource. They were home, but we were forced off home to a place called Corrandirk. And at Corrandirk, we weren't allowed to speak our native tongue, forced to read and write English before it'd be afforded a meal, let alone a paycheck. So for all of you joining us today that speak languages other than English, I implore you to teach future generations, because losing language is an absolute travesty to the fabric and identity of who we all are. And at the mission, Uncle Bill of Bellairs was our head man, and he walked from what we call Hillsville today with two little fellas, Uncle Simon Wonga and Uncle William Barak. And as councillors, you have a great responsibility to guide those young minds, to listen to those young minds. They are our future, our legacy. But one of those young fellas was downstairs in the foyer. His name is Simon Wonga, and the other was Uncle William Barak. And if you walk past them, know that they advocated tirelessly, not just for First Nations, but for all Victorians, because the knowledge they had to share would benefit generations well beyond their tenure. I ask you to hold the laws set by Bunjil from the very inception as councillors on how you listen, how you care, and how you come together collectively as one. Because we know when we get that balance right, it repays tenfold. And that is one of the biggest drivers of Bunjil's law and being a collective and the way we support each other and community, the cornerstone of Indigenous communities throughout Australia. I want to pay respects to my elders past and present. I want to pause and acknowledge each and every one of you and acknowledge your elders past and present also. Woman Jika Wurundjeri Bullock, Yemen Gundibik. In the Woiwurrung language, I just said welcome to the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. Our traditional lands go west to the Werribee River, north to the Great Divide, east to Mount Borbor, and south to Mordialloc Creek. Nungojin, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for that wonderful welcome. I advise the gallery that this meeting is being recorded and will be available on Council's website. All care is taken to maintain your privacy, however your presence may be recorded. In accordance with Council's governance rules, meetings may not be photographed, filmed or recorded without the consent of the Chief Executive Officer. I advise there are no apologies for tonight's meeting. And as per Rule 72.3 of Council's governance rules, I wish to advise that Councillor Cook-Lamb is attending this meeting virtually. Councillor Lamb, can you please confirm that you can hear and see the meeting?
Yes, Mayor, I can see and hear very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. For the gallery's benefit, Councillor Lamb's available on that screen behind you. Thank you, Councillor Lamb. I can confirm we can hear and see you. Councillors, are there any leave of absence requests? We'll move on. In accordance with Local Government Act 2020, Do any councillors have a conflict of interest in relation to any of the agenda items? No. We'll now proceed to public question time. Public question time is managed in accordance with Council's governance rules. Members of the public can submit a maximum of 3 questions prior to the commencement of the meeting. As Chair, I will decide who answers the question. Public question time is limited to 15 minutes unless councillors consent to an extension.
Would you like me to read
Yeah,
this question?
I'll hand it over to the CEO to read the questions.
Thank you. So the first question is from Jennifer Chemay, and she asks 3 questions. Firstly, what is the current status of any planning applications or permits related to Angler's Tavern, and what is the council's position on any proposed changes or expansions given the business operates in a flood zone? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Now, I think, Mayor, our Director, Planning and Environment will answer, and I believe another councillor might wish to comment.
Yeah, if I can ask Dr. Mike McIntosh to answer that question.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and through you. Council's records show several planning permits have been issued for Angler's Tavern dating back to 1968. There's one planning permit application currently under assessment which proposes the storing of 5 shipping containers within the car park. Council officers have requested further information from the applicant to enable a proper and full assessment as required by the Planning and Environment Act and the Maribyrnong Planning Scheme. The site is in the land subject to inundation overlay, LSIO, which identifies the site as liable to flooding from the Maribyrnong River. Both the Act and the Planning Scheme require planning applications to be referred to Melbourne Water as the determining referral authority and the Floodplain Management Authority. Council must consider the position, comments and requirements of Melbourne Water in its decision on the application.
Thank you, Director.
So we have a second question. Out and put to my new microphone on. Thank you, Mayor. The current location of the shipping containers within the car park is in breach of the Maribyrnong Planning Scheme, says Jennifer Chemay, with officers working with the business owner to resolve that non-compliance. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong part. I'm going to start again. The question is Angler's Tavern currently in compliance with all relevant council regulations, including those related to noise, responsible service of alcohol and patron capacity? We have had several resident concerns with noise levels, consumption of alcohol by youth behind the shipping containers and intoxicated patrons. And again, Planning and Environment Minister,
Director Mike.
Director.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. The current location of the shipping containers within the car park is in breach of the Maribyrnong Planning Scheme, with councillors working with the business owners to resolve that non-compliance. The business owner has lodged a planning permit application seeking to retain the shipping containers, as noted prior. Should this application be refused, then the business owner will be required to remove the shipping containers within 60 days of that decision, unless an appeal is lodged at VCAT. Matters relating to the responsible service of alcohol, intoxicated patrons, patron capacity and the like are the responsibility of the Liquor Licensing Victoria and or the Victoria Police. Council is unable to comment on or enforce these matters, but can follow up with those relevant authorities.
Thank you, Director. I'll continue reading the questions. There's a third question on that, as well by Jennifer Chemay. The question is, what feedback has the council received from residents and businesses regarding the operation of Angler's Tavern, and how is the council addressing any concerns raised? I'll hand it back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. So over the past 12 months, councillors received 3 official complaints for excessive noise with the site currently the subject of ongoing monitoring for both noise and parking violations. And we are, whilst they're official, we are aware that a number of residents have contacted us in the last 12 months expressing concerns about the operation of the premises.
Thank you, Mike. I know, Councillor Yingy, you've got something to add to that.
Sorry. Mike's responded to most of that, but what I did want to say first off is just to thank Jennifer, who's sitting over there in the audience, for coming here today, and also, you know, all the other residents that have attended today, but particularly from River Ward, and Jennifer for taking the time to attend tonight's meeting and to raise the important issues, as well as share, I guess she's previously shared with me, we met a couple of weeks ago, about ways in which council could improve our ways of working. What I really wanted to do though was just acknowledge, that I met with Jennifer a few weeks ago on the Australia Day long weekend, but also, and she showed me around the street and the surrounds around Anglers and explained some of the issues and concerns that residents, you know, shared. But just really wanted to echo that a lot of the concerns that she shared with me were also concerns that had been raised by residents whilst I was campaigning, and, you know, particularly in relation to noise, emitting from Anglers, safety concerns, parking challenges, and patrons blocking residents' driveways. And as Mike mentioned, these are issues that, you know, council is monitoring and working through. And I really just wanted to, thank you for sharing your concerns and for coming here today, but also just to ensure that, you know, help you by ensuring that we will be following up on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yingy. We'll move on to the next question, which is by Lewis Page, who asks the following questions. First question, prior updates as to the status of Council's progress to achieve the actions in the Air Quality Improvement Plan have been vague and fall short of considering whether they're delivering real improvements to the inner west air quality. I refer to the agenda item 9.7 of Council's 18 June 2024 meeting and particularly attachment 3. Please provide greater particulars, including details of how your progress is actually improving air quality and details of any commitments or responses provided by the state following Council's advocacy for a truck ban on Williamstown Road. If I can hand it to the CEO.
I will certainly answer that, and councillors may wish to add. So, Mayor, Council continues to deliver initiatives aiming to achieve improved health and environmental outcomes for the community, and it is a major part of our advocacy. The Air Quality Improvement Plan guides these efforts and acknowledges that often the most significant changes rely on both federal and Victorian state government policy and initiatives. With this in mind, the plan focuses primarily, as I said, on advocacy designed to raise and represent the concerns of the community and to influence long-term state government policy and development in this space. To this end, a range of advocacy initiatives have been delivered, and if I could just list some of those. So we've advocated for a truck ban on Williamstown Road, we've advocated for release of the Victorian Air Quality Strategy, we've advocated to the state government to fund a clean truck program and a clean ports program for the Port of Melbourne. We've advocated again to the Victorian state government to accelerate the time frame for the introduction of the electric vehicle bus fleet. And we've advocated for the installation of vehicle emissions filtration system in the Westgate Tunnel ventilation stacks prior to the opening of the Westgate Tunnel project. We've completed 30% of the actions in the plan. That's 11 and 23 ongoing, being either considerations applied in ongoing council operations and decision-making or projects that have commenced but not yet completed. There are 3 initiatives in the plan yet to commence. Measuring our progress around the implementation of the plan is largely focused on advocacy initiatives and seeking policy change at both the state and federal government level, as opposed to measuring actual emissions locally. There are a range of initiatives or programs which could significantly improve the air quality in Maribyrnong and the broader West, many of which need to be led by federal and/or state government. Our efforts remain focused on collaborating with all levels of government and stakeholders to achieve the plan's objectives. The long-term plan is to continue to review and implement the actions outlined. With regard to Williamstown Road, the Victorian Government has released the update of the Victorian Freight Plan, a conversation summary in response to submissions made as part of the consultation in 2024. No specific response regarding a truck ban on Williamstown Road has been received. Council is still advocating for that. We will continue to promote further improvements to the transport network as the update of the Victorian Freight Plan proceeds and Council progresses development of a new integrated transport strategy for the municipality. Council officers continue to work closely with the Department of Transport and Planning to get best results from the Westgate Tunnel project and Cycle Valloway, including banning of large freight trucks on major roads in Maribyrnong and Hobsons Bay when the Westgate Tunnel opens.
Thank you for that. We have a question from Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Mayor. I probably just really wanted to kind of add, I guess, and emphasise that advocacy unfortunately doesn't happen overnight, and a lot of the levers for changing the way trucks run through our streets and which streets they run on are the responsibility of the state government, unfortunately. And whilst Council has done repeated advocacy to a number of different ministers over a couple of years now, it still is not state government policy to remove trucks off Williamstown Road after the Westgate Tunnel is open. So Council is really leading those conversations about that in particular with government. But as you can imagine, unless government decides to change its mind, Council sort of doesn't have many levers to pull there. So thank you for your question, because it is a good question, because often we can't see what's happening behind the scenes with advocacy, because it is often, it's letter writing, it's meetings with ministers, it's, you know, kind of pursuing things in the chamber, here, making resolutions, you know, supporting the community. So, yes, just thank you for your question, and Council hasn't given up on any of those advocacy points or positions at all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. We'll move on to the next question, which is a question by Tracy Chan, who asks, who has given the approval for the Slow Food Market Maribyrnong to launch in Maribyrnong Family Park? The traffic on weekends into High Point is already bad as it is. The parking area around the park is mostly occupied by residents and is going to make traffic going in and out into the area a total nightmare. It is currently a one-way street. Parking for customers at Aldi would be unjust should patrons of the market park at Aldi.
Director Planning and Environment.
I'll hand it back to you, Mike, to answer that.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and through you, just to directly answer this in terms of who's given approval, Council has provided approval for this. But in support of the trial of the slow food market at Maribyrnong Family Park, the event organiser will implement a traffic management measures to direct patrons away from La Scala Avenue to alternative areas off-street parking as advised by our traffic team. Additionally, the organiser has engaged with the owner of private parking facilities at the Edgewater Specialist Centre and the vacant parking lot at Edgewater Square to secure these areas for overflow parking. We acknowledge that Maribyrnong Park is well serviced by public transport, with both bus and tram services operating nearby. And to further support sustainable transport options, both Council and the event organisers will promote active transport messaging across various marketing channels.
Thank you, Director. Before we proceed, I see we're almost out of the 15 minutes, so with the consent of Council, I wish to propose an extension to public question time of 15 minutes. Councillors, do I have your consent? Yes. Thank you, Councillors. We'll now continue with public question time. The next question I have is by Fletcher Bubb, who asks the following. With reference to the recent Facebook post, 24th January 25 from Mayor Pradeep Tiwari that he and other councillors were going on a Footscray CBD walk. Can you please share what were the top 3 to 5 things that the group identified as potential improvements and actions that can be taken to improve the Footscray CBD precinct? I can probably reply to that unless any other councillor wants to. So he asks for our top 3 to 5. There were many. I mean, I had the privilege of going on a site walk with all other councillors to see the entire Footscray CBD precinct. Some of the areas we identified and we discussed were safety and cleanliness, which included lighting, CCTV, enhanced street cleaning, community security, public space improvements, business and economic growth, just support for the local businesses, flexible retail spaces, nighttime economic activation. We spoke about meeting and working with the local trader associations to improve the mall and surrounds. We spoke of our cultural and community engagement, public art, murals, regular events and festival, youth and community programs. We spoke about improving connectivity and transport. In addition to these, I myself went through a walk with a local Minister for Government, Nick Stokos, and our Katie Hall MP a week after that walk, in which we identified areas that we could use or work with the local traders to improve the Footscray Mall and surrounds. And we're currently going through that in council, but they were the main areas that we identified in our walk. So if any other councillors would like to add anything to that? Councillor Yengi?
One of the other things that we discussed was just around the land banking, and we discussed opportunities to activate those spaces and or work with developers to see what we could do with the lands around the areas that were currently not being developed and or utilised, and sort of brainstormed ways in which we could bring them to life and create sustainable opportunities for our community to utilise the spaces.
Thank you, Councillor Yengi. Councillor Meredith?
Yep. So in addition to all of those items, safety, outreach services, activation of public spaces, we also talked about advocating to state government as well to encourage more services, homes, more co-health workers. So just talking about more like state and federal funding as well for the necessary services to support the people out on the streets there as well. But safety was definitely a big conversation that we were talking about, and police was came up too.
Thank you, Councillor Meredith. Councillor Semra?
A thriving Footscray CBD is a thriving Melbourne, and it was great to be there alongside the councillors. And when I look at Footscray Station, there's immense foot traffic happening there, and I think there's an opportunity to tap into that. And one of the things that got brought up, I think, to reiterate the point of Councillor Meredith and Mayor Tiwari, is around community safety and the perceptions around community safety. We spoke about the opportunity to continue the work we're doing with partnering with local police, community stakeholders to address obviously drugs and alcohol, as well as antisocial behaviour. Also, when I look at small businesses, looking at how can we support them to create networks, and I think which will be able to create a vibrant municipality. Also, enhance streetscape and urban design. There's an opportunity to focus on upgrading the streetscape to make Footscray CBD more pedestrian friendly and aesthetically pleasing. This might include widening footpaths, installing new public seating areas, improving street lighting, and adding greenery. These help to improve, I guess, and make Footscray a more vibrant, attractive, and accessible space. Yeah, that was all.
Thank you, Councillor Semra. Councillor Thomas?
It is on. Thanks for your question, Fletcher. I know there's been a lot of interest. Councillors, all of the councillors have heard from many different people and groups across the municipality. And of course, this is not something where there's a quick fix or where council can wave a magic wand. I think if that were the case, you know, we would have already waived it. And I think we can all agree that what we're seeing particularly in the mall area, are people who are under stress, whose lives are likely very complex and that they are dealing with, you know, any number of sort of complex, you know, personal issues. So for me, that is sort of, I think, the first thing that we do need to address. And, you know, we've had some investment from the state government in additional outreach social workers. But I think that is probably the thing that is most needed at this stage, because unless we as a community can help to support those people and help them to address the needs that they have, we might be at risk of sort of moving them to another spot but not actually addressing the underlying issue. So I think that sort of the person-focused solutions and care and support probably needs to come first.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. We have a second question from Fletcher Bob. In relation to the recent announcement of the Creative West project, can you provide details on the reported $10 million cost estimate for planning and design? 1, will the federal government's contribution of $5 million be provided first and spent prior to council funds being spent? And second, how does Maribyrnong Council intend to fund its $5 million contribution? Hand it to the CEO.
Turning the microphone on. Council has been working, as many of you will know, for many years on this project and advocating to state and federal government for funds. So we are very grateful to the federal government for its support to take this project to the next stage. And I will mention that this is actually the result of a very comprehensive application into a funding program that we have been successful with. As the Minister indicated as part of her announcement, the funds from the federal government will be received via a funding agreement from the state. To date, we haven't received the agreement, and this does usually take a little bit of time. And we expect that the exact terms of the agreement obviously will be outlined once we receive it, but we do expect to have this in the coming months. It's likely that funds will be expended over multiple financial years and will be a mix of both the council and federal funds across the duration of the project. So as such, we can't really give today specific figures on how much will be spent when. We also, I'd note that council does have the $5 million contribution in its long-term financial plan, and this year will obviously be subject to the adoption of council's budget. So council will make allocations across multiple financial years as part of its regular capital budget allocation to be adopted in June.
Thank you, CEO. His third question is, in relation to the recent announcement of the Creative West project, can you provide details on how the $100 million project construction cost was estimated and arrived at, and how is it intended this will be funded?
Mayor, this project has been through a number of rigorous, externally validated processes to ensure that costings are as accurate as possible. The investment case and detailed costings have been provided by expert economics consultants with extensive expertise in projects of this kind, and we've built on the concept design developed by the contracted architects. The construction phase of the project is subject to support and funding from both the state and federal governments, with council to contribute funds as well as in-kind support, along with the financial support of 2 philanthropic organisations. Creative West has been a Lead West and council advocacy priority for over 4 years, and council will continue to seek support from other levels of government to support construction costs.
Thank you, CEO. We'll move on to the next question. It's by Pierre Vero has submitted 3 public questions, with the last question being in the form of a statement. While Council's governance rules allow for the provision of public questions, it does not provide for statements to be made. I thank Mr. Vero for the statement, however, wish to advise him that the statement will not be read out at the meeting. His first question: is Council aware that a resident riding her bike was run over by a semi-trailer on Somerville Road on the 22nd of Jan, leaving her with serious life-changing injuries?
I might refer to the Director of Infrastructure.
I'll hand it over to you, Patrick, to answer that question.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. And to answer the question up front, Council is aware of this incident and since then have been liaising with the Department of Transport and Planning to better understand the circumstances. The intersection of Williamstown Road and Somerville Road, where it's understood this incident occurred, is managed by the Department of Transport and Planning, and this includes lane configurations and traffic signal operations. Council meet regularly with the department to assess road operations and propose remedial actions to address safety concerns, as it has done in this case.
Thank you, Patrick. The next question is, why did Council elect not to install protected bike lanes on Somerville Road as part of its recent resurfacing works, noting that A, protected lanes would have prevented the semi-trailer from entering the 90-centimetre wide bike lane was riding in, and B, with the knowledge that Vic Road's data shows that there have been 3 serious bike crashes prior to the resurfacing and 2 subsequent. Hand it back to you, Patrick.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The resurfacing works on Somerville Road were completed as part of Council's Distributor Roads program from Geelong Road to Whitehall Street. Generally, the bike lane line marking remained consistent with what existed prior to the surfacing works. However, a line mark chevron treatment was included with these works to provide additional separation and safety improvements between the traffic lane and the bike lane along the majority of the route. And no line marking changes were made at the intersection.
Thank you, Patrick. We'll move on to the next question, which is by Madeline Surley.
Excuse me, Mayor. Sorry. Could I just add something to that one?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Thomas.
No,
too fast for me.
Thanks. I just wanted to probably offer, on behalf of Council, even though I'm not the Mayor, our support for the person that was injured. I understand that that they have they've had a number of operations and they're still very unwell. This is a really, as a bike rider who rides at that intersection multiple times a day, I can understand why and how that that person was run over by a truck. It is really unsafe, and I really just wanted to say on behalf of Council, you know, that we just send you our best wishes for a good recovery.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. We'll move on to the next question by Madeline Surley, who asks the following question. Council received government grants for community flood recovery after the Maribyrnong floods. Council provided some details in the notes to the financial statements in the 23-24 annual report, including amounts carried forward for financial year 2024 to 2025. When will Council release audited financial statements under Australian Accounting Standards and Local Government Act 2020, itemising all funds received and spent / plan to meet, A, financial transparency and probity obligations, and B, ethical and moral considerations to the flooded community whose ongoing devastation and grief instigated the grants in the first place?
Mayor, I can respond to that. In accordance with Section 98 of the Local Government Act 2020, the audited statements will be presented to the Council meeting for endorsement in October 2025. All of Council's finances are audited by the Victorian Auditor General, and of course they all meet the Australian accounting standards.
Thank you. The second question is, Council is a member of the Community Aviation Consultation Group for the development of the third runway by Melbourne Airport through its appointed representative, along with representation of other impacted adjacent councils. Would Council please disclose A, past, current and intended actions raised from its membership of the CACG regarding the acknowledged flood risks arising from the development, and B, the outcomes to date of those representations. Back to you, Sue.
And thank you, Mayor. Through you, I can confirm that Maribyrnong City Council is a member of the Melbourne Airport Community Aviation Consultation Group, CACG, with the Manager City Development Council's nominated representative. CACG meetings provide a forum for discussion between members, representatives from key participating agencies and Melbourne Airport. Council considered the Melbourne Airport third runway proposal and major development plan at its City Development Delegated Committee meeting on the 24th of May 2022, and with the full report of this available on Council's website. While flood impacts was not specifically raised in the submission, the general environmental impacts of the third runway in terms of the impacts on the community was noted. In November 2022, the Honourable Catherine King, Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government, approved Melbourne Airport's master plan, with the Minister subsequently approving the third runway in September of last year. The Minister's approval is subject to several conditions, including mitigating environmental impacts. Council has not made any direct representations at the CACG regarding flood risks.
Thank you, CEO. How are we going for time?
I think we had 1 minute, so do we need a further extension? Yes.
Okay, just noting time, I'd like, with the consent of Council, I wish to propose a further extension to public question time of 15 minutes, noting that we've only got a couple of questions, so I don't think we'll need that much time. But councillors, do I have your consent? Yes? Yes, councillors, I have all your consent? I think that's yes. Thank you. We will now continue with public question time. The next question is by Glenn Yates, who asks the following question. In the past 2 years, the Ballarat Street crossing situated on Francis Street has gained significant negative notoriety, with 2 almost fatal accidents involving pedestrians and trucks gaining significant media attention on both mainstream TV and press. What initiatives or proactive steps has MCC taken to attempt to improve the safety of this crossing, and what examples can you share with the community specifically?
Mayor, I think we might ask the Director of Infrastructure to respond.
So we'll give it to Mike to answer.
I can answer that. Thank you. And
Patrick.
through you, Chair, so similar to the previous transport question, Francis Street is also a state-owned road and managed by the Department of Transport and Planning. And again, is responsible for lane configurations and traffic signal operations. And officers are continually meeting with the department around safety concerns with this road and many other roads that, that are owned by the state and our municipality. Part of that is reviewing operational and safety issues on our major arterial roads, and we're continually working with the department on implementing possible improvements where, wherever we can.
Thank you, Patrick. The second question is, the Ballarat Street crossing is used by families with children who attend Norfolk Street Childcare Centre, Yarraville West Primary and St Augustine's Primary. In order to gather the data needed to help advocate towards potentially having a red light/speed camera installed, is it possible for MCC to position its mobile VMS SAMs close to the crossing to record speed and activate the too fast, slow down messaging on the VMS, please? This would be similar to what happened on Somerville Road and Anderson Street when monitoring motorists' behaviour outside Kingsville Primary and Yarraville West Primary. Back to you, Patrick.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. In short, yes, it is possible, and I'd be happy to take that up with the department regarding how we can, or how that initiative can be implemented.
Thank you, Patrick, and that was the last question in public question time. So public question time is now closed at 7:11 p.m. We'll move on to agenda item 6.1, which is a confirmation of minutes for 10th of December 2024. I call for a councillor to move that the minutes of the council meeting held on 10 December 2024 to be confirmed. Councillor Thomas. I call for the councillor to second the motion.
Oh, I just need to read
yep.
it out first.
Sorry, Councillor Thomas, would you like to speak to the motion?
Council confirms the minutes of the council meeting held on 10 December 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I'll call for a councillor to second the motion. Councillor Semra. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Semra? I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Move on to the next item, which is reports from committees. I advise there are no reports from committees to be tabled. Petitions. I advise that there are no petitions to be tabled. And I advise that we will now proceed to the officer report agenda items. So, agenda items 9.1, quarterly performance and financial report for the period ending 31st December 2024. I call for a councillor to move a motion. Councillor Thomas.
That council notes the quarterly performance and financial report for the period ending 31 December 2024 shown at attachment 1, and that a revised budget pursuant to section 97(3) of the Local Government Act 2020 is not required.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I'll call for a councillor to second the motion. I think Councillor Lamb. Are there any questions or points of clarifications? Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'll just say a few words. Thanks. So tonight, I'm really happy to move this motion. It's one of those reports that comes around every quarter, and it provides a lot of detail for the community on not just council's financial sort of progress and status for that quarter, but also for how actions contained in the council plan are progressing. And it's a good a report card, I suppose, for those in the community who are following both the council plan and the council budget. So it also provides a forecast outlook for council's 2024-2025 budget as well. So in terms of the budget, there have been some variances that have been identified in both revenue and expenditure categories, and this has forecast an unfavourable underlying result of just over $56,000 at this stage, predominantly due to changes in spending in materials and services, but also sort of balanced off with a positive position for employee costs that was offset by some spending on agency and contractors. So in the council plan, there have been 16 actions delivered, or 26% so far of the 61 actions, and 32 actions, or 52%, that are progressing to target, and 14 of those actions are progressing, but they're delayed according to the time frame within the council plan. So council's capital and asset improvement program is well underway, with the actual expenditure at the end of December at just over $35 million. And with some commitments to further purchasing at around $24 million, which makes up a total of nearly $60 million a year to date. And that's 74% of the annual budget, which is just over $80 million. And that, where am I up to? And at the end of the second quarter, the Chief Executive Officer has reported that she considers that a revised budget is not required. So that's a good thing. It means we're on track. We can pay our debts when or our expenses when they arise, and that we've done a good job of planning and budget forecasting. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say. So I recommend that everybody has a read of the budget bits if that's your thing, but also the council plan actions, which is a good read. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
Very briefly, Mayor, I think Councillor Thomas mentioned very comprehensive in detail about that. I would like to thank you, the Director from Corporate Services, Ms. Lisa King, and Mark McConnell, Manager Financial, did a wonderful job, and their team did a wonderful job on that. The project saving and delivery and manageable with the budget. We save and we also provide the service as well. So I commend the motion to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lam. Would any of the councillors like to speak to the motion? Councillor Pereira.
Yeah, if numbers aren't your thing, I'd also like to highlight that I appreciate the Appendix 1, which helps describe the budget position in relation to the progress through the Council's action plan, and also highlight that we're heading towards the creation of the next budget. So I would encourage the community to start getting their budget submissions ready.
Thank you, Councillor Pereira. Any other councillors? No. I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Move on to item agenda 9.2, Bellairs Reserve, Draft Concept Plan. I call for a councillor to move the motion. Councillor Thomas. Would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I'll just move it first. That Council endorse the release of the draft Bellairs Park concept plan as shown in attachment 1 for community consultation.
Thank you. I call for a councillor to second the motion. Councillor Meredith. Are there any questions or points of clarification? No. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of things. Anyone who lives in Yarraville will know this park and will know that it's probably not the best park that we have in the municipality, so it does need a little bit of TLC. Our officers and have gone and developed a concept plan that really will kind of bring the park up to standard. It's responding to the consultation that happened with nearby residents, because it is a very, very local park, and it looks lovely on the design. It's got some nature play, which sounds really exciting, some stepping stones and some other I think loggy bits as well, if that's a technical term, and improved tree planting and grassy areas, etc. So yeah, really just encourage people to jump on Your City, Your Voice and tell us what they think about the plan.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion? No, that's fine. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? No. I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item agenda 9.3, proposed closure of part of Market Street, West Footscray. I call for a councillor to move the motion. Councillor Thomas.
That Council 1, acting under Clause 9 of Schedule 11 of the Local Government Act 1989, the Act, power to place obstructions of barriers on a road permanently. A, resolve that the required statutory procedures be commenced to consider closing part of Market Street, brackets road, between Shorten and Barrett Reserves in West Footscray, shown outlined in attachment 4, by permanently placing obstructions or barriers on the road, in brackets proposal. B, note that the proposal involves closing the road to vehicular traffic and constructing the closed road into an open space reserve, allowing access to bicycles and pedestrians. C, requests that public notice of the proposed closure of the road be given in a local newspaper in accordance with sections 207A and 223 of the Act, uploaded on Council's website, and notice sent to surrounding owners. D, authorise the Chief Executive Officer or their delegate to undertake the administrative procedures necessary to enable Council to carry out its functions under section 223 of the Act in relation to this matter. E, resolve that any submissions received pursuant to section 223 of the Act be heard and considered at a committee meeting comprising of the whole of Council. 2, note that once all section 223 submissions have been considered, a further report will be presented to Council to decide whether or not to proceed with the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I call for a councillor to second the motion. Councillor Yengi. Are there any questions or points of clarification? Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
That was a very long motion, yes, so I just want to perhaps clarify for people in case they're not quite sure what we're proposing. Basically, anyone who I guess was part of the master planning process at Rec West will know that as part of the proposal it was to close the top end of Market Street so that Shorten and Barrett reserves could become one reserve, and people who were using either as part of the upgraded development would be able to sort of move really nicely from one part to the other. It also allows people to sort of ride their bike or walk up from Market Street and through the new development. So this is just seeking council approval to go out to public notice that this road will be closed and to take submissions and to hear submissions if there are any. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion? No. Okay. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? Okay. I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. We'll move on to agenda item 9.4, internal resolution procedure. I call for a councillor to move a motion. Councillor Thomas.
That Council, in accordance with Section 140 of the Local Government Act 2020 and Regulation 12A of the Local Government (Governance and Integrity Regulations 2020, adopt the internal resolution procedure as shown at Attachment 1.
Thank you. I call for a councillor to second the motion. Councillor Semra. Are there any questions or points of clarification? Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
Thanks. Only just to say that, this is one of those sort of overlooked but very important pieces of our governance structure, and one that I guess outlines how, if there are issues that need to be dealt with internally, issues between councillors, that this very clearly sets out how that should happen in a respectful and fair and just way for everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion? Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. I'll move on to agenda item 9.5, Victorian Local Government Association Local Government Working Group on Gambling. I call for a councillor to move the motion. Councillor Lamb. You're on mute.
Of its recommendation that Council nominate Councillor Bernadette Thomas as its representative to the Victorian Local Government Association Local Government Working Group on Gambling.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. I'll call for a councillor to second the motion. Councillor Meredith. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
I'm very briefly, I think Councillor Bernadette Thomas have very experienced and have been involved in a number of similar committee. I'm sure she's doing really well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
I think Bernadette has been doing a great job in that area as well, and happy for her to continue.
Thank you, Councillor Meredith. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Agenda item 9.6, Arts Advisory Committee, revised terms of reference. I call for a councillor to move a motion. Councillor Yengi.
Sorry. that council notes the ongoing work of the Arts Advisory Committee. 2, approves the revised terms of reference for the Maribyrnong Arts Advisory Committee shown in attachment 1. That council appoint up to 3 councillors to the Arts Advisory Committee, inclusive of a chair. And 4, that council appoints Councillor Bernadette Thomas as chair and Councillor Mohammed Semra as representative, and also Councillor Meredith. Samantha Meredith as another representative to the Arts and Advisory Committee, effective from the 18th of February.
Thank you. I call for a councillor to second the motion. Councillor Pereira. Are there any questions or points of clarification? No. Would the mover like to speak to the motion? No. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion? Yes, Councillor Pereira.
Only to say that this was a highly competitive process to choose people to represent us on this committee, and I think that that just indicates how intensely interested we all are in the progression of this work and our collaboration with the arts community.
Thank you, Councillor Pereira. And I'd also just like to add that, well done to all councillors on agreeing. We were fighting over this position, so well done. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? No. I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Move on to item agenda 9.7, Audit and Risk Committee Biannual Report, November 2024. I call for a councillor to move a motion. Councillor Semra.
That council endorse the Audit and Risk Committee Biannual Report, November 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Semra. I call for a councillor to second the motion. Councillor Lamb. Would the mover like to speak to the motion? No. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
Formally moved, thanks.
Okay. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item agenda 9.8, Governance Report, December 2024. I call for a councillor to move a motion. Councillor Semra.
That council note the December 2024 Governance Report.
I call for a councillor to second the motion. Councillor Meredith. Are there any questions or points of clarification? Would the mover like to speak to the motion? No. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion? No. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item agenda 10.1, Notice of Motion 2025/01, You Win Some, You Lose Some More Gambling Report. I call for Councillor Thomas to move this notice of motion.
Thanks, Mayor. The motion is that Council 1 writes to the Prime Minister, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, the Minister for Communications, the Honourable Michelle Rowland, the Minister for Health and Aged Care, the Honourable Mark Butler, urging the Federal Government to adopt in full the recommendations from the June 2023 You Win Some, You Lose More report from the Inquiry into Online Gambling and its impacts on those experiencing gambling harm. 2, endorses the recommendations contained in the You Win Some, You Lose More report. 3, writes to the Lead West Councils, Brimbank, Hobsons Bay, Melton and Wyndham, A, encouraging them to endorse the recommendations of the report and write to the relevant ministers, as per above, urging the Federal Government to adopt the recommendations in full, and B, asking them to support Maribyrnong to convene a Western Alliance for Gambling Reform, to jointly advocate for gambling reform at the state and federal levels, engage relevant agencies in reducing harm from gambling, and, as per Council's reducing harm from gambling policy, to encourage a collective approach to any proposed changes to gambling venues across the Western metropolitan area. And 4, calls on the Municipal Association of Victoria and Australian Local Government Association to advocate to the Federal Government on behalf of local government across Australia to adopt the recommendations in full.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I call for a councillor to second the motion. Councillor Pereira. Are there any questions or points of clarification? Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'll just say a few things. The inquiry into online gambling and its impacts on people who experience harm from gambling was established, I think, in September 2022. The report came out in 2023, and to date, the government hasn't given a response about taking up any of the 31 recommendations. People have probably heard that in the media, the focus has largely been on banning gambling ads, either completely outright or banning it, during sports time, when sports played on TV, before and after sport, an hour before, an hour after. There's been a whole lot of iterations, but the government still hasn't sort of moved on any of these recommendations, even though it was its own initiated inquiry. And whilst the government kind of, I guess, dilly-dallies over this, people are losing money, they're losing their homes, they're losing their families, their relationships, their lives because of the impacts of online gambling, but also other forms of gambling as well. And the 31 recommendations include some kind of, I guess, structural changes, some changes around how operators operate, how the government kind of regulates, and also, as I said, banning advertising. And the recommendations were supported by the inquiry. They've been supported by the Australian Alliance for Gambling Reform. They've been supported by organisations like the Australian Council of Social Services, some of the medical associations as well. So it's got broad support across, I guess, sort of social justice organisations and sectors of the community. I think that it's well worth council supporting the recommendation, urging the government to take up the recommendations, supporting the recommendations in the report, and also working collaboratively with our Lead West councils, which we have really good relationships with on other advocacy points, to ask them to see if they're interested in sort of joining forces, I guess, so that we can be a stronger voice against gambling harm across the western suburbs.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion? Councillor Pereira.
Only just very briefly to say that this is an issue that affects a lot of people across Australia, but also a lot of people across the West. And I'm really happy that we can form this, or at least initiate this conversation with the other councils, so that we can take a strong position for our community, because it does impact people significantly individually, but also the fabric of society and our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Pereira. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? I see Councillor Meredith.
Yep, just briefly, gambling causes harm. It's designed to keep people playing. It's a system that's designed to win, and that's at the cost of people. And I think we need to prioritise people over profits, and the industry needs to be accountable for the harm that it's causing to people.
Thank you, Councillor Meredith. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? Okay. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. We now move on to councillor question time. Councillor question time is managed in accordance with council's governance rules. Councillor question time is limited to 15 minutes unless councillors consent to an extension. Are there any councillor questions?
Yep.
Councillor Meredith.
I've got a question about the Westgate Tunnel ventilation stacks. Can Council provide an update on its advocacy regarding efforts of the lack of filtration in the ventilation stacks of the Westgate Tunnel project? Specifically, what actions has Council taken to communicate concerns about unfiltered emissions to the relevant state government and Westgate Tunnel? Have any recent discussions occurred to request for the installation of filtration systems? And what additional steps does Council plan to take to advocate for filtration in the ventilation stacks to enhance air quality and support improved public health outcomes?
Thank you, Councillor Meredith. I can respond. For you and all new councillors, Council has been advocating for those filtration equipment in the ventilation stacks for several years, ongoing. And in fact, this week, the Mayor has written to the Minister for Transport and Infrastructure, Gabrielle Williams, and the Environment Minister, Steve Dimopoulos, requesting meetings to discuss the ventilation stack filtration, and those have been sent this week. Since mid-2023, Council has written to the Premier, Jacinta Allen, who at the time we wrote was the Minister for Planning, also the Minister for Environment, Steve Dimopoulos, the Minister for Transport and Infrastructure, Danny Pearson MP, and the Minister for Ports and Freight, Melissa Horn MP. These letters have requested the inclusion of filters in the Westgate Tunnel filtration stacks. This is in addition to other meetings with government and other stakeholders to discuss air quality improvement. The letters from Council have highlighted our health emergency declaration, the need for air quality actions in the Inner West, and the role that the ventilation stacks will play to support this. Council also acknowledged the recent efforts by the Victorian Government to address the issue. On June the 11th, 2024, Danny Pearson MP responded to Council stating that the Victorian Government's position remains the same and that the Westgate Tunnel's ventilation system was designed to meet Victoria's air quality standards. The response states that the air quality measures were approved by the Environment Protection Authority, the EPA, and as per their assessment, that filters are not required to meet air quality standards. This doesn't mean that Council won't continue advocating, but that is the consistent response that we have had, and I understand that is the best advice that the state government have at this point. The Westgate Tunnel Project Environment Effect Statement is referenced to support this. The Victorian Government's position is that the filters will not be required. However, the project has been designed to allow for retrofitting if needed. The letters sent to Ministers Williams and Dimopoulos this week express Council's opposition for the filters to be retrofitted and calls for them to be pre-installed as part of the state government's Clean Air for All Victorians strategy. Additionally, we're incorporating the Westgate Tunnel ventilation filters into our air quality advocacy ask. Since our declaration of a health emergency, the air quality strategy has been distributed extensively to state and federal government ministers and organisations, including the Climate Change Authority, creating a strong platform for which to advocate for ventilation filters. And I might add with that the Council has also advocated federally to Minister Jed Carney and Minister Butler in terms of the Minister for Health. And we have also highlighted this in a meeting with the Prime Minister's office. So we have certainly been active in advocating, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you, CEO. Are there any councillor questions on that? Councillor Thomas?
Yep, not on that one. I have a new quick question. Is that okay?
Yeah, we'll move on to the next question. Councillor Thomas?
Great, thank you. Just wondering if the CEO could provide an update on what collaborations are ongoing with Victoria Police and Community Services to sort of respond to the needs in Footscray CBD and to help improve that safety. So just interested in about what actions Council's undertaken to enhance public safety and address community concerns in the CBD, what formal advocacy we've engaged in with the state government to support a coordinated response to public health and safety challenges, and what further advocacy efforts Council has undertaken to ensure continued support and resources for addressing these issues effectively. I know that's a lot of questions.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas, and happy to answer them. And again, this is another area that Council has been advocating strongly for and has We have some control over the amenity in the area, and we're working hard to improve that. But in regard to the police, Council continues to work in partnership with Victoria Police in addressing community concerns around public safety in Footscray CBD. This includes 2 VicPol operations that occurred in November and December that were supported by Council, led by the Footscray Neighbourhood Policing Unit, which attracted positive community feedback through various channels. Council continues to support local organisations to activate Nicholson Mall and surrounding area through our Love Your West from December 2024 to June 2025, and I'm sure councillors you'll have the opportunity to approve some further work in that area through the budget process if you wish to. Council is also piloting the Creative Places program to activate empty shop fronts and underutilised spaces in Footscray CBD. We have 4 landlords that have agreed to participate in this, and we've invited many more landlords to participate, and we hope they do. And I will also like to mention that that program was part funded from the state government as well, so very grateful for that. Council will soon begin short-term works at Madden Square that will include resurfacing 220 square metres of concrete, the installation of a half court for ball sports and skate elements. Would you like me to continue with some of the advocacy? So Council advocated in partnership with Katie Hall to see an increase in resources available to who is the local member for Footscray, to see an increase in resources available to co-health outreach services in Footscray. This happened over several months, and we were successful in receiving co-health to receive funding for a daily alcohol and other drug outreach service in Footscray. The expansion of the City Street Health Program in Footscray for people struggling with chronic addiction, and the new Footscray outreach service, which is operated by co-health. Council is also a key member of the Future Footscray Steering Group that was established by Katie Hall MP in 2024. Council has and continues to advocate for local mental health and outreach services provided by the state government, addressing the housing crisis for low-income and at-risk people, and we do a lot of advocating around that, improvements to the bus interchange in Footscray CBD, and I note that the state government has funded some initial planning around that bus interchange project. Safer streets for cyclists and pedestrians to encourage active transport, and to ensure that the existing planning permits for significant redevelopment sites in central Footscray are realised. After successfully obtaining, as I mentioned earlier, the $5 million grant for Creative West design, which Council is matching, we'll continue to advocate for the precinct's construction to transform the area into a vibrant cultural precinct that will help reinvigorate the creative arts, hospitality and retail sectors in the area. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Are there any other councillor questions? Councillor Thomas?
Could I just ask the CEO a follow-up? Just in regards to the co-health outreach workers, does that have an end date on that?
I'd have to take that on notice, Councillor Thomas, but I expect it would have been funded for at least 12 months, if not longer, but I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Any further questions from councillors? If not, councillor question time is now closed at 7:46 p.m. Councillors, are there any items of urgent business? No, we'll move on. I advise that there are no items of confidential business, and I'd like to declare the meeting closed at 7:46 p.m. Well done, everyone.